DORIA Ragland is being accused of serving 4 years in prison during Meghan Markle's childhood. The receipt behind that claim is an article recovered from an archived website, and the disappearance of the page has been presented as evidence that somebody powerful wanted the story buried. But the article does not identify a court, a case number, a sentencing date, a charge, or a correctional facility. More importantly, the same prison allegation was later withdrawn on British television after commentator Carol Malone acknowledged that she had relied on misinformation found online. Doria's public timeline may contain unanswered years, but does an incomplete family history prove incarceration, or has repetition turned a rumor into a verdict? That distinction matters because the original video does not begin with a court document. It begins with a dramatic article and asks the audience to treat the article itself as the missing record. According to the video, the page explains why Meghan lived mainly with her father for part of her childhood, why some school staff reportedly remembered Thomas Markle more clearly, and why Doria appeared less often in public accounts of those years. From there, the claims become steadily more serious: financial fraud, a prison sentence, hidden family history, suspicious conduct, and alleged palace protection. Yet the more serious the allegation becomes, the less original documentation the audience is shown. The Wayback Machine can establish that words once appeared on a web page. It can preserve a headline, a paragraph, a publication date, and sometimes the link surrounding an article. What it cannot do is authenticate every claim inside the saved page. An archive preserves publication, not truth. If a website once alleged that Doria received a 4-year sentence, the archive may prove that the allegation was published. It does not prove that a judge imposed the sentence. That requires a separate evidential trail, and the article presented in the video does not provide one. This is the first major reversal in the story. The deleted page may feel more convincing because it disappeared. Viewers are encouraged to think that removal itself signals danger. If the article was harmless, why would it vanish? But disappearance is not authentication. Websites close, domains expire, editors remove weak stories, publishers respond to legal concerns, pages break during redesigns. Owners decide that old material no longer meets their standards. Any of those possibilities could explain why a page is unavailable. None identifies Buckingham Palace as the person responsible, and none proves that the allegation was accurate. The palace cover-up claim, therefore, depends on a circular argument. The article is said to be true because it was removed, and the removal is said to prove a cover-up because the article was supposedly true. No palace email, legal letter, staff instruction, or named insider is produced to connect the royal household to the web page. The video repeatedly asks why the palace protected Doria, but it never establishes that the palace controlled the publication in the first place. A question about a missing page becomes an accusation against an institution without the documentary bridge needed to connect them. The prison claim deserves an even higher standard because it is not a vague judgment about personality. It is a specific legal allegation. A 4-year sentence should be traceable through identifiers: a jurisdiction, a court, a charge, an approximate sentencing date, a correctional institution, an attorney, a docket, or reporting based on official proceedings. Not every old American record is easily searchable online, and the absence of a quick internet result would not prove that no record could exist anywhere. But the burden still belongs to the person making the accusation. No original criminal case record is presented in the article, the video, or the materials shown to the audience. That does not mean every question about Doria's timeline must be dismissed. Biographical accounts have long suggested that Thomas Markle handled much of Meghan's daily care during part of her adolescence. He may have been the parent most visible at school, the parent managing transport, performances, homework, and regular household routines. That is relevant to understanding Meghan's upbringing. It may also explain why teachers or administrators remembered Thomas more readily. But being the primary caregiver is not the same as being the only parent, and it does not establish where the other parent spent every month of those years. Families after divorce are rarely organized as neatly as later biographies make them sound. One parent may have the primary residence, while the other remains involved. Work schedules, housing, money, education, distance, and informal family arrangements can shift over time. A mother may attend fewer school events without being imprisoned. A father may handle daily routines without holding exclusive legal custody. A child may feel emotionally close to both parents while living mainly with one. These possibilities do not prove what happened in Doria's case, but they demonstrate why the prison story is not the only explanation for the available facts. There are actually two different gaps in this story. The first is a biographical gap. The public does not possess a complete month-by-month account of Doria Ragland's life during every disputed year. The second is an evidential gap. The article alleging a conviction does not present the legal record needed to support it. The first gap cannot be used to fill the second. Not knowing precisely where a private person lived or worked does not create a court judgment. Unanswered years may justify careful questions. They do not supply a charge, trial, sentence, or prison. The video also treats reported school memories as though they provide indirect criminal evidence. Even if a principal or teacher genuinely said that Doria was rarely seen, that testimony would describe her visibility within one setting. It would not establish incarceration unless the witness could connect the absence to a verified legal event. School involvement can reveal something about daily parenting, but it cannot carry the weight of a criminal conviction. The stronger the conclusion, the closer the evidence must be to the event being alleged. Then comes a detail that changes the entire chronology. Before this archived article was promoted as a breakthrough, British commentator Carol Malone had publicly apologized for saying that Thomas raised Meghan while Doria was in prison. Malone explained that she had believed the claim because of material she later understood to be misinformation online. She withdrew the allegation. That correction was not a court ruling, and it did not produce a complete biography of Doria's missing years, but it directly challenged the same prison story that was later recycled as if it had only just been uncovered. The most recent development then was not the rediscovery of the article. It was the public withdrawal of the allegation before the article returned as new evidence. That matters because viewers were not simply given an old rumor. They were given an old rumor without the newer correction that weakened it. The timeline was reversed. The article was positioned as the final receipt, while the later event that questioned its reliability was left outside the frame. Royal receipts must restore that missing sequence before asking the audience for a verdict. The sequence is revealing. First, there was a gap in Doria's public biography. Then, an online prison rumor offered a simple explanation. The rumor appeared in articles and social media posts. It entered broadcast commentary. The broadcast claim was challenged and withdrawn. Later, the archived article returned and was treated as independent confirmation. But repetition is not independent corroboration. If 10 web pages copy one unsupported allegation, they do not become 10 sources. They remain 10 routes leading back to the same unresolved origin. This is how rumor laundering works without requiring a secret coordinated conspiracy. Each new platform appears to validate the previous one. A blogger cites another website. A commentator says the claim is widely reported. A video finds the old article and calls it buried evidence. The audience sees multiple appearances and assumes multiple investigations must exist behind them. Yet when the chain is followed backward, the sources may circle around one another without ever arriving at a court file. Volume creates confidence, even when the underlying evidence has not changed. The article itself also expands far beyond the original missing years question. It introduces claims about an earlier child, a relationship with a teacher, lottery wrongdoing, tax manipulation, custody strategy, and suspicious family events. These allegations are not minor supporting color. They concern sexuality, parentage, crime, and death. The video presents them in a way that makes each new claim seem more believable because the previous claim has already been accepted. But one unsupported allegation cannot corroborate another. Narrative accumulation is not evidence. Those claims should not be carried into a responsible documentary without original, reliable records. A hidden child would require far more than an unnamed online paragraph. A criminal tax scheme would require an identifiable proceeding. An allegation involving a death would require a coroner's finding or another authoritative source. Private sexual claims demand exceptional caution. Removing these details does not weaken the royal receipts version. It strengthens it by keeping the investigation focused on the one question the available material can genuinely examine: whether the archived article proves the alleged prison sentence. The video further argues that Doria inherited property after her father's death under circumstances described as mysterious. Again, the audience is invited to treat uncertainty as suspicion and suspicion as character evidence. An accident that feels unusual to a commentator is not proof of wrongdoing. Without the original coroner material, police conclusion, or documented dispute, that branch creates heat, but no dependable receipt. It also pulls the story away from the central claim and encourages viewers to judge Doria through a collection of dark suggestions rather than verified events. The same problem appears in the discussion of professional credentials. The video says Doria never really obtained a social work license, then uses that claim to suggest she should not be trusted around vulnerable people. California distinguishes between different forms of registration, licensure, and social work employment. So a responsible analysis must identify the exact role and credential being discussed. The state's Board of Behavioral Sciences directs the public to its official license and registration search for current verification. Without specifying the credential and the job requirement, the accusation cannot support a finding of professional wrongdoing. An NPI listing may identify someone as a healthcare provider, but it does not by itself establish full clinical licensure. Any claim about Doria's professional status would still require an official California license or registration result matched to the correct individual. That distinction illustrates why loose language is dangerous. One source may establish professional identification, while another would be needed to establish a particular state license. The proper conclusion is not that every credential question has been solved. It is that the video's broad claim goes further than the specific evidence it presents. The human cost of that pattern is larger than one rumor. Doria has maintained a relatively private public profile. She has appeared at major family events, including Meghan and Harry's wedding, and has spoken only selectively about her life. Privacy leaves fewer direct statements for journalists to quote, but it does not transfer ownership of her biography to strangers. In this story, former relatives, commentators, broadcasters, websites, and video creators all become narrators of her past. The woman at the center has the least control over the record being assembled around her. For many women watching in Britain and the United States, the recognizable part is not royal glamour. It is the way motherhood can be judged through absence. A father who handles more school routines may be described as dependable. A mother who appears less often may be asked to account for every missing day. If she remains quiet, silence can be treated as evasiveness. If she responds, the response can be called defensive. The question may be legitimate, but the standard of proof should not change. Simply because the person being judged is a mother, the question also reveals an uneven burden. Thomas's years as the more visible parent are often treated as self-explanatory, while Doria's quieter years are treated as suspicious by default. A father can be credited for caregiving without turning the mother's absence into criminal evidence. The record should allow both conclusions at once. Thomas may have carried more of the daily responsibility, and the prison allegation may still be entirely unsupported. Fairness does not require erasing his role. It requires refusing to invent hers. That does not require portraying Doria as a perfect parent. The public record may support the view that Thomas took on more daily responsibility during important years. Doria may have made choices that affected the family arrangement. Meghan's recollections, Thomas's accounts, and other biographies may not align perfectly. Royal receipts does not need to choose a saint and a villain. The fair question is narrower. Does a complicated custody and caregiving history prove a 4-year prison sentence? On the material presented, it does not. The distinction is important for Meghan as well. The original video repeatedly compares mother and daughter, using alleged misconduct by Doria to explain Meghan's marriage, ambitions, and treatment of her father. This is guilt by association. Even if a verified record existed against one family member, it would not prove the character or intentions of another. A daughter is not evidence of her mother's alleged crime, and a mother's unresolved biography is not proof that the daughter repeated the same pattern. Inside a royal marriage, that mother-daughter framing is emotionally effective because it offers one answer to many existing grievances. Viewers who already distrust Meghan can treat the story as an origin explanation. This is where the behavior came from, this is why Harry changed, and this is what the palace should have discovered. But emotional coherence is not factual corroboration. A theory can feel satisfying because it organizes familiar suspicions into a single family pattern. It still requires evidence for each claim it makes. The palace angle works in the same way. The video asks why royal officials allowed Meghan to marry Harry if they knew about Doria's alleged record. But this question assumes the record existed, assumes the palace found it, assumes officials believed it, and assumes they later suppressed it. None of those steps is demonstrated. Royal background checks and private briefings are not generally available to the public, which creates space for speculation. That space cannot be converted into confirmation simply because the institution does not answer every online accusation. Silence from the palace is especially weak as proof. The royal household does not publicly rebut every rumor concerning extended relatives. Refusing to comment may reflect legal caution, privacy, institutional policy, or the judgment that a claim does not merit amplification. It may frustrate viewers who want a direct answer, but it does not show complicity. The same is true of Doria's silence. A person does not acquire a duty to publish private records merely because an online audience has assembled a theory around missing years. The strongest version of the suspicion should still be presented fairly. Meghan appears to have spent significant time living with Thomas. Some people connected with her schooling may remember him more clearly. Doria's public biography is not equally detailed for every period. An article exists that made a specific prison allegation. Those facts create a question worth examining. They explain why the rumor found an audience. They do not, however, establish that the article's answer is correct. The strongest countercase is equally clear. The prison claim lacks an identifiable original case file in the material presented. The archived page does not explain its sourcing. The existence of the page proves publication, not conviction. A later broadcaster publicly withdrew the same allegation after acknowledging it came from online misinformation. Biographical uncertainty remains, but the most dramatic conclusion has not earned the evidential certainty with which it is being repeated. What would change the verdict? An authenticated court docket naming the correct Doria Ragland, a verified sentencing order, a correctional record, or credible reporting based directly on those documents would fundamentally alter the analysis. So would a complete custody file explaining the family arrangement during the disputed years. By contrast, another blog repeating the same claim would add almost nothing. More copies are not better evidence unless they introduce independent sourcing. The bankruptcy claim requires the same discipline. A federal bankruptcy filing, if accurately identified, could be verified through the appropriate court record system. Bankruptcy would not prove imprisonment, fraud, or moral unfitness. People file for bankruptcy for many reasons, and a financial proceeding must not be transformed into a criminal conviction. The important question is always what the document legally represents, not what a dramatic narrative can make it imply. This is why the phrase "the palace failed to bury" is so powerful and so misleading. It gives the archived page two identities at once: suppressed evidence and verified evidence. The suppression claim makes the page seem important, while the presumed importance is used to support the suppression claim, yet no evidence identifies who removed it. The archive preserves the allegation, but it does not preserve evidence behind the allegation, because the article does not show the audience that evidence. The more responsible mystery is therefore not whether the page existed. It did. The mystery is whether anyone in the chain ever verified the prison story before repeating it. Did the article rely on an original record? Did later websites independently check the claim? Or did they copy one another? Did television commentary mistake circulation for confirmation? Why did the correction receive less lasting attention than the accusation? Those questions examine the information system, rather than placing a private woman on trial without a file. Corrections rarely travel with the same force as accusations. The initial claim is shocking, simple, and emotionally complete. The correction is narrower, slower, and often treated as procedural. By the time an apology appears, the original story may already have been clipped, reposted, and absorbed into existing beliefs. Months later, somebody can rediscover an older version of the allegation without encountering the correction at all. The rumor appears new because its history has been stripped away. That is the story control mechanism at the center of this case. DORIA controls very little. The archived publisher controls the original framing. Commentators control the moral interpretation. Broadcasters can amplify the allegation. Video creators can revive it. Audiences decide which version feels most plausible. The correction exists, but it competes against a story that explains more, angers more, and confirms more. The record is incomplete, while the accusation arrives fully formed. A responsible verdict must resist both extremes. It would be wrong to say every year of Doria's past has been publicly explained. It would also be wrong to say the missing years are evidence of a prison sentence. It would be wrong to treat Thomas's role as primary caregiver as meaningless. It would be equally wrong to treat his caregiving role as proof that Doria was incarcerated. The available material supports a complicated family history, not the complete criminal biography built around it. What is proven? An archived article published the allegation, and Thomas is widely reported to have taken a major role in Meghan's upbringing during part of her youth. A British commentator later apologized for repeating the prison claim and said it came from online misinformation. What is credibly reported? Doria remained involved in Meghan's life and later appeared at major family events while maintaining an unusually private public profile. What is disputed? The exact degree of Doria's presence during every stage of Meghan's adolescence, the details of custody and residence, and the origin of the archived article's prison allegation. What remains unknown? Doria's complete activity during every disputed year, and whether the article's writer relied on any document not shown to readers. What did the headline exaggerate? It converted a web page into a verified legal record and a biographical gap into a solved criminal mystery. The final receipt is therefore not the dramatic article alone. It is the difference between the article and the evidence the article should have contained. A 4-year sentence requires more than a paragraph. A deleted web page requires more than suspicion before it becomes a palace operation. A father's caregiving requires more context before it becomes proof against a mother. And a rumor repeated across platforms requires independent sourcing before repetition can be called corroboration. DORIA RAGLAND'S public timeline may remain incomplete. That is a fair reason for careful public questions. But the archived article proves that the prison allegation was published, not that a 4-year sentence occurred. The later public correction does not answer every question about Meghan's childhood, yet it changes how responsibly the accusation can be repeated. So the real mystery is no longer simply where DORIA was. It is why a story without an identifiable case file became far more powerful than the correction that challenged it.